Book 17. How They Fought Over the Body of Patroclus. Menelaus had not failed to mark the death of Patroclus. He came up at once and bestrode the body like a cow standing over her calf, the first she ever bore, with plaintive lowing. He held spear levelled and shield before him, ready to kill anyone who should attack. Euphorbus also was not indifferent to the hero's fall. He presented himself before Menelaus and said, "Go back, my lord King Menelaus. Go back. Leave the body. Leave the spoils. I was first to strike him. Not a man of Trojans or allies comes before me. Then leave me my triumph, or I will kill you, and life is sweet." Menelaus cried out in hot anger, "Father Zeus, how ugly is a vainglorious boast! There's not as much pride in a panther, or a lion, or a wild boar, and a boar's the most blustering swaggerer on earth, as there is in these sons of Panthous with their ashwood poles. Hipporenor was a strong man, but he had small joy of his strength when he made light of me and stood up to me and thought I was one to be despised. I don't think he walked home on his own feet to make his wife and parents happy. I fancy I'll quench your pride, too, if you stand up to me. I advise you to go away and hide yourself. You had better not come near me, or you'll be sorry for it. When a thing is done and past, even fools are wise at last." Euphorbus did not care. What he said was, "Now, indeed, my lord Menelaus, you shall pay in full for my brother whom you killed. And here you are, boasting how you made his wife a widow in her new bridal chamber, and brought mourning and lamentation upon his parents. I might console those unhappy creatures if I could bring your head and your armor, and lay them in the hands of Panthous and Lady Phrontis. But it shall not be long before we put our quarrel to the test of life or death." With that he struck a blow on the shield. The point bent and did not go through. But Menelaus, with a prayer to Father Zeus, lunged, and as the man stepped back, struck him on the root of the throat, putting his weight into the blow. The blade cut through, and he fell with a dull thud in his rattling armor. That hair, lovely as the Graces, those tresses tight-pinched with gold and silver wire, were drenched with blood. He lay like a tall stem of olive, which a man keeps in a private garden where plenty of water flows, growing fair and high. It sways in the breath of all the breezes, heavy with the white flowers, until suddenly a storm wind roots it out of the trench and lays it along the ground. And so lay he when Menelaus had killed him and stripped his armor. When a mountain-bred lion, proud in his strength, ravishes the best cow from a grazing herd, he takes the neck in his strong teeth and breaks it, then gulps down blood and bowels, tearing savagely. Dogs and herdsmen hoot loudly from a distance and dare not come near, for they are all afraid. Just so, none of those men dared to come near Menelaus. Then he would have carried off the spoils without trouble, but Phoebus Apollo grudged it to him. So the god took the shape of Mentes the Ciconian and spoke to Hector in plain words. "Hector, you are chasing what you will never catch when you run like this after the horses of Achilles. It is not easy for a mortal man to master them and drive them. That is only for Achilles, whose mother is herself an immortal. Meanwhile, King Menelaus has been defending Patroclus, and he has killed your best man, Euphorbus Panthrides." Then he went back into the melee. Hector looked round angrily and saw them at once, the body lying on the ground with blood flowing from the wound, and Menelaus stripping off the armor. He shouted and hastened towards them like a flame of fire. Menelaus heard the shout and said to himself, "What shall I do? If I leave the spoils, and if I leave Patroclus, who lies here for my sake, not a Danaan, but will hate the sight of me. If I stand and fight Hector and the Trojan army alone to save my honor, I shall be surrounded, for here comes Hector with all his army. No, all that is nonsense. When one fights a fellow that finds favor in the sight of God, he simply tempts Providence and brings tribulation rolling upon himself. Then no Danaan will hate the sight of me if he sees me retreat before Hector, because Hector has heaven to help him. But if I could hear anything of that redoubtable man Iliad, we might even tempt Providence a bit and strike a blow to save this dead man for Achilles Pylades. That would be the best choice of evils." While he was deliberating, Hector and his Trojans had come near. Menelaus left the body and retreated, turning again and again, like a bearded lion chased from the farmyard by dogs and men with shouting and spears. His stout heart freezes within him, and sorely against his will he leaves that farm. So in a slow, reluctant pace Menelaus went on until he found his people. Then he faced about and looked everywhere for Telamonian Aeus. He soon saw him on the left of the battle, rallying the men who were in mortal fear of Phoebus Apollo. He went off at a run and soon reached him and said, "Aeus, this way! Don't waste time! Hurry up for Patroclus! He's dead, but we may bring back the body to Achilles. The armor is lost. Hector has it." This did arouse Aeus. He and Menelaus together made their way through the press. Hector had taken the armor, and now he was dragging away the body, intending to cut off the head and throw the body among the carrion dogs. But now comes Aeus behind that great shield like a stone wall. Hector retreated and leapt into his car. He gave the armor to be carried back to the city and to be his chief pride. Aeus now covered the body with his broad shield. He stood as a lion stands over his young when huntsmen meet him leading his cubs through the woods. With a defiant swagger he draws down the eyelids to hide his eyes. So stood Aeus with his legs across the body of Patroclus. By his side was Menelaus, ever more and more anxious. Now Glaucus, with a frown, reproached Hector for his delay. "You are handsome enough, Hector, but there is a good deal lacking in you as a soldier. You have a great name for nothing. You are a regular shake-leg. You had better consider now how you and your people alone are going to save Ilios. Not one of the Lycians, at least, will fight for you, since we get no thanks, it seems, for these everlasting battles. How are you likely to save an ordinary man when you deserted Sarpedon in this heartless way? And he was your friend and comrade, and you left him to be the Argives' prey and plaything. He did good work for you and your city while he lived, and now you have not the pluck to save him from the dogs. If any Lycians will listen to me, it's homeward we will go, and that means certain destruction for Troy. For if the Trojans had now real, bold, undaunted courage, such as men feel when they fight for home and country, we should very soon drag Patroclus into Ilios. If we could drag him away and get him into the city dead, the Argives would very soon release the armor of Sarpedon, and we should bring him too into Ilios. For the master of Patroclus is one who is chief champion of the Argives, he and his men. But you would not stand up to Aeus and look in your enemy's eyes, or fight it out with him, for he is a better man than you." Hector looked angrily at him and said, "How could a man like you, Glaucus, say such an outrageous thing? Damn it all, I thought you were the most sensible man in Lycia. I don't think much of your sense now when you say such a thing. I would not stand up to that monster Aeus, so you say? Battles and trampling horses don't make me shiver, but the will of Zeus Almighty must always prevail. And he can make the strongest man take to his heels, and robs him of victory easily, or again he sends him forward to the fight. Pray, come this way, sluggard, stand by my side and see my work. See whether I shall be a coward all day long, as you declare, or if I shall stop the fighting of a Danaan or two, however fierce they may be over dead Patroclus." With this he called to the Trojans at the top of his voice, "Trojans, Lycians, my brave Dardanians, be men, my friends, don't forget your duty. Fight your hardest until I put on the armor of Achilles, which I have torn off the back of Patroclus after I killed him." He hurried away out of the battle and ran as fast as he could to the men who were carrying the armor. They were not far away, and he ran like the wind. There, behind the battle, he stood and changed. He gave his own gear to the carriers, and put on the incorruptible armor of Achilles Pylades, which the heavenly ones had given to his father, and his father had given to him in old age. But the son never grew old in his father's armor. When Zeus Cloud-gatherer saw him behind the battle, arming himself in the gear of Pylades, he shook his head and said to himself, "Ah, poor creature, you have no thought of death in your mind, and death is very near. You don the incorruptible armor of a mighty champion whom others do tremble at. His comrade you have slain, that man so gentle and so strong, and torn his armor brutally from head and shoulders. Yet I will put great strength into your hands to set off against this, that you shall never return out of this battle. or give to Andromache the famous armor of Pelion. Over these words he bowed with his black brows. But he made the armor fit the body of Hector, and the dreadful spirit of war entered into him and filled every limb with power and strength. He came back to his allies shouting. There they all saw him shining in the armor of the great Achilles. Then he appealed to each in turn, Mesthles and Glaucus, Medon and Thersilochus, Asteropaeus and Dicenor and Hippothous, Phorcys and Chromius, and Ennomus the bird diviner, and said plainly, without wasting words, Hear me now, you 1,000 tribes of my allies from the country round about. I did not want numbers, and I was not looking for numbers when I sent round to your cities to invite you here. What I wished was that you, of your own generous hearts, might save the women and children of Troy from the Achaean invaders. That is my thought when I exhaust my people with supplies and food for you, and try to content you all. Then let each man turn straight to the front. Come death, come life. That's how war and battle kiss and prattle. The man who succeeds in driving back Aeneas and gets Patroclus into Troy, dead as he is, half of the spoils I will allot him, and keep half myself. He shall have as much pride as I have. Straight for the Danaans in a heavy mass they marched, with spears at the ready. They expected soon to drag away the corpse from Aeneas Telamoniades. Fools! He killed many of them over that corpse. At last Aeneas was convinced, and said to his companion, We are wasting time, my dear prince. I cannot believe any longer that we shall get safely out of this by our 2 selves. I am not so much worried about this dead corpse of Patroclus, which will soon be a good supper for dogs and vultures, as I am worried about my own live head, which may come to grief. And for yours, too, when I see battle all round us like a cloud, Hector himself and certain death once more manifest for us. Look sharp. Call some of our good men if you can make one hear. Menelaus shouted for help loud and clear. Friends, captains and princes, you guests of our royal house who drink free at the board of Agamemnon and Menelaus. Captains in high command, but Zeus gives rank and honor still to every creature at his will. I really can't make out where they all are. There is such a blaze of battle hereabouts. But do come, if I don't mention your names. Come, everybody. You ought to be ashamed to let Patroclus be just a toy for dogs to play about with. Aeneas the runner heard him clearly enough and came running up first. Then Idomeneus and his formidable retainer Meriones. But who could ever remember the names of all who came after these to reinforce the fighting? Then the Trojans rushed on in a mass, roaring and shouting like a great wave roaring against the swollen stream at a river's mouth, when the foam flies high and the headlands boom. The Achaeans stood firm and determined round the body, fenced by their metal-plated shields. Cronion also covered their shining helmets in a thick cloud. He had no feeling against Menetiades when he was alive, and when dead he hated to let him be mauled about by Trojan dogs, and so he helped the defenders. At first the Trojans pushed the Achaeans back, and they left the body. The Trojans hurt none of them in the retreat, as they would have liked to do, but they began to drag the body away. But the Achaeans were not likely to be long in rallying when Aeneas was there. Aeneas, the finest man and the strongest man in the army after Achilles. He soon swung them round again and charged like a wild boar twisting about in the woods, which easily scatters huntsmen and dogs and all. So Aeneas scattered the Trojans who were crowding about Patroclus, determined to drag him away and cover themselves with glory. Now Hippothous, the son of Pelasgian Lethos, had tied up the ankles of Patroclus with his sword belt, hoping to gain credit with Hector. He was dragging the body away when a blow fell on him irresistible. Aeneas was upon him and drove the great spear crashing through his helmet, and the brains ran out along the socket. The man dropped the foot of Patroclus and let it lie as he fell prone over the corpse, far from fertile Laris. Few and short had his days been when Aeneas laid him low, and he never paid to his parents the debt of a grateful son. Then Hector cast a lance at Aeneas, but Aeneas was watching his eye and dodged a little aside. The blade hit Schedius and ran under his collarbone and stuck out of the shoulder, bringing him down with a bang and a clang in his armor. Schedius was the son of Iphitos, and the best man among the Phocians. He came from Panopeus, where he was king. Phorcys, Phaenop's son, now straddled across Hippothous, but Aeneas stabbed him right in the belly. The blade pierced the corselet plate, and his bowels gushed out. He fell in the dust, clutching at the earth. Then Hector and his front men fell back, and the Achaeans, with shouts of triumph, dragged away the bodies of Phorcys and Hippothous and stripped off their armor. And now the Trojans would have lost heart. They would have been driven behind the walls of their city, and the Achaeans would have prevailed by their own strength and courage, even against the decree of Zeus. But Apollo made Aeneas take part. He assumed the shape of the herald Periphas Epatides, a faithful old servant of the family, and said, "Aeneas, I wonder how you could defend Iliad if a god were against you. Why, I have seen other men who trusted in their numbers and the strength of their manhood and kept their realm even against Zeus. But in our case, Zeus wishes victory for us rather than for the Danaans. Yet you all run away forever and will not fight." Aeneas knew Apollo shoot afar at a glance, and called out to Hector, "Hector, and your other captains, Trojans and allies, this is really a disgrace if we are to be driven into the city like beaten cowards. But one of the gods has just come and told me that Zeus, the god of battles, is still on our side. Then let us have at the enemy. Don't suffer him tamely to rescue the body of Patroclus dead." Then he dashed through the front ranks and stood before them. The others wheeled about and faced the Achaeans. Aeneas struck down a man, Leocritus, Arisba's son, the trusty comrade of Lycomedes. Then Lycomedes came up to the body and cast his spear. The blade struck Apisaon Hippocydes in the liver, and he collapsed. This man came from Paeonia, and he was their best man after Asteropaeus. Then Asteropaeus rushed forward at once to avenge his friend, but he could do nothing. The shields all stood like a fence about Patroclus, and the spears stuck out. Aeneas was everywhere, keeping the men in hand. He would not let anyone move back or go out in front, but made them stand close round the body and lunge when they could. Such were the tactics of that prodigious man. The ground was red with blood. Men were falling one after another among the assailants, and the Danaans too, for they did not fight without bloodshed, although they lost fewer men because they were careful to keep together and defend one another. As they fought in this fiery conflict, you could not suppose there was either sun or moon in the sky, for a thick cloud covered all the place where the fighting men stood about the body of Patroclus. But the rest of the two armies fought at their ease in the open air. The sharp, clear sunlight spread everywhere, and not a cloud was to be seen on earth or mountains. All these fought with pauses for rest, avoiding the shots which came from either side, with plenty of room between. But the group in the middle had a hard struggle against both cloud and battle, and even the best of them were worn out with their efforts. But two men, Thrasymedes and Antilochus, had not yet heard that Patroclus was dead. They thought he was up at the front and still fighting. They were in a place apart where Nestor had sent them, watching the carnage and rout of their people. All day long there were hard times for those who were fighting round the body of Patroclus. Their desperate struggle covered them with sweat, knees and legs and feet, hands and eyes. They tugged and pulled at the dead body, like a party of men who have to stretch an ox hide soaking with grease, and pull away standing in a ring till the natural moisture runs out and the grease runs in. The hide is well stretched with all those men pulling. So they pulled that body against one another in the narrow space, the Trojans towards Troy and the Achaeans toward the ships. That was a savage maul. Neither Ares nor Athena would have thought it something too small to glut their anger. See what a bitter struggle of men and horses Zeus kept on the stretch about Patroclus. But Achilles did not know yet, as it seems, that Patroclus was dead, for the battle was far away from the ships, under the walls of Troy. Achilles never expected that he was killed. He thought that if he got as far as the gates he would return alive, for he never expected at all that Patroclus would take the city without him, nor with him, indeed. So much he had often been told by his mother when she spoke privately of the will of Zeus. Certainly his mother told him nothing of all the misfortune which had now come about, and how the dearest of all his companions had been killed. So they went on without ceasing to grapple with one another in deadly strife over the body, and you might have heard the Achaeans saying, "Ah, my good friends, there is no doubt we could retreat with honor and let the Trojans drag away this man in triumph. May the black earth swallow us first. That would be better." And the Trojans would say, "Ah, my friends, not a man must give way, not if we are all doomed to die together over this body." So they encouraged one another, and so they fought, while the iron din resounded through the unvintaged air to the brazen sky. But behind the battle, the horses of Achilles had been weeping, ever since they heard that their driver was low in the dust, struck down by Hector's blood-stained spear. What could Automedon do? Often he touched them with a quick lash, often he cursed, and often he coaxed. But go they would not, neither back to the sea nor forward to battle. They stood with the car steady behind them, moving no more than a stone pillar on a tomb. They drooped their heads till they touched the ground. Hot tears ran from their eyes and fell as they mourned the driver whom they had loved and lost. Their thick manes hung from the yoke-pad over both sides of the yoke. Cronion was grieved as he saw their mourning, and shaking his head he said to himself, "Ah, poor things! Why did we give you to a mortal man like Peleus, when you are immortal and never grow old, to share the sorrows of miserable mankind? For I think there is no more unhappy thing than man, of all creatures that breathe and move on the earth. Nevertheless, you and your splendid chariot shall never be driven by Hector Priamedes. That I will not suffer. Is it not enough that he has the arms and utters vainglorious boasts? You shall have strength from me in your knees and your spirit. You shall bring Automedon to the ships and save him from the battle, for I will still give them victory, and they shall slay until they reach the ships. Then the sun shall go down and sacred night shall come." Then he breathed courage into the horses. They shook the dust from their manes and brought their car swiftly to the battlefield. Automedon swooped as a vulture on the geese, fighting for all his sorrow. Lightly he charged into the thick of the throng. Lightly he left pursuing Trojans behind. But he killed no creature whom he pursued. For alone in that sacred chariot he could not both hold the swift horses and attack with the spear. At last a friend saw him, Alcimedon, son of Laerces, Haemon's son. He stopped behind the car and called out, "Automedon, has some god robbed you of your good sense and put this useless notion into your head? There you go, out in front, fighting the Trojans alone. But your comrade is dead. Hector himself has the armor of Aeacides on his back, and mighty proud he is." Automedon answered, "Alcimedon, you're the man for me. There's no one else in the whole army who can manage these fiery horses, only Patroclus, that heaven-born genius, while he was alive. But now he is dead and gone. Come on, take whip and reins. I'll get out and fight." He leapt out as he spoke. Alcimedon got into the welcome car and took over whip and reins. This Hector saw and called out, "Aeneas, my standby, I have just seen those 2 horses of Achilles suddenly appear in the battle, and drivers who are no good. I could take them, I hope, if you'll help. I don't think they would dare to stand up to you and me." Aeneas was ready, and they advanced together under their trusty shields, good oxhide with a thick facing of metal. Chromios and Eurytos went with them. They felt sure they would kill the men and drive off those splendid horses. Poor fools! Not without bloodshed would they depart company with Automedon. But Automedon commended himself to Father Zeus, and full of confidence he turned to his faithful friend. "Alcimedon," he said, "don't keep the horses too far from me. Let me feel their breath on my back. I believe Hector will stick at nothing until he has killed us both and got hold of these horses and routed our people, unless he is killed himself." Then he called the Aeaeus pair and Menelaus. "Aeaeus, you two, and Menelaus, leave the body to the best men you have, and let them see to the defense. But here are we two, alive. Help us and save us. Hector and Aeneas are on us with all their weight, and they are the most dangerous of the Trojans. Ah, well, all is on the knees of the gods. I will have a shot myself, and the Lord of Heaven shall decide." He cast his spear and hit the shield of Eurytos, The blade went through the shield and through the belt and pierced his belly. Aretos gave a leap forward and fell on his back, as an ox leaps forward and falls when a strong man strikes with a sharp axe behind the horns and cuts the sinew. The sharp spear turned in his bowels, and he was still. Hector made a cast at Automedon, but Automedon was watching his eye and stooped forward. The spear flew over him and stuck in the ground behind, quivered, and was still. Then they would have fallen to with swords, but Aeus and the runner came to their comrades' call and parted the fighters. Their coming alarmed Hector and Aeneas and Chromius, who retired, leaving Aretos dead on the spot. Automedon quickly stripped off the armor and said triumphantly, "There now! I have eased my sorrow a little for my friend's death, although the man I killed is worth less." He took up the blood-stained spoils and put them in the car, then got in himself with blood all over feet and arms, like a lion that has gorged a bull. The strife round Patroclus now became more bitter and desperate than ever. Zeus had sent down Athena to encourage the Danaans. He had changed his mind, no doubt. She wrapped herself in a lurid cloud, like the cloud about a rainbow which Zeus stretches across the sky to be a portent of war, or the chilly storm which drives men from their work upon the earth and distresses their flocks. Then she dashed among the Achaeans and pressed them on to the fight, one and all. She began with Menelaus, who happened to be near, and said in the shape and voice of Phoenix, "You, Menelaus, will certainly have shame and disgrace if the great friend of Achilles is worried by dogs under the walls of Troy. Stand firm, be brave, and keep the men at it." Menelaus said, "Oh, Daddy Phoenix, dear old ancient, let Athena give me strength and keep the shots away, and I would gladly stand firm and defend Patroclus, for his death has touched my heart indeed. But Hector is furious as blazing fire. He kills and kills without ceasing, and Zeus gives him the victory." Athena Bright Eyes was pleased that Menelaus had prayed to her first of all. She strengthened his back and knees and put in his inmost heart the courage of a fly. "Beat him off from your skin as often as you like, he goes on biting, and human blood is his dainty dish." So Menelaus was filled with the irrepressible audacity of a fly. He stood over the body and cast his spear. There was a man Podes among the Trojans, Eetion's son, a rich man and a brave man. Hector thought more of him than any man of the nation, for he was his comrade and boon companion. The spear struck this man on the belt as he started to escape. It pierced him and brought him down. Then Menelaus pulled the body among his people. Now Apollo did his part for Hector. He took the shape of Phaenops from Abydos, who was dearest of his guest friends. "Hector," he said, "what Achaean will ever fear you again, now you have run away from Menelaus, who used to be a flabby spearman? Now he has killed your true friend and good soldier Podes, and picked him up by himself, and dragged him from under your noses, and got away with him." This made Hector furious, and he pressed forward. At the same moment Cronades turned the battle. Thick clouds covered Mount Ida, lightning flashed and thunder rolled, the mountain quaked. Zeus took up his tasseled aegis cape, shining bright, and shook it at the Achaeans. They turned in panic flight, and the Trojans began to prevail. Boeotian Peneleos began the retreat. Moving slowly backwards, he had a shoulder grazed and cut to the bone by Polydamas, who was close upon him. Next, Hector struck Leitos, Electrion's son, on the wrist and disabled him. Leitos made haste to escape, looking about him watchfully, for he knew he could not handle the spear now. Hector pursued, but Idomeneus hit him on the corselet over the breast. The spear broke at the socket, and the Trojans raised a shout. Idomeneus was now disarmed, and he would have been a dead man, for he had come on foot from the ships. But help was at hand, for Cyrannus of Lictos in Crete had brought his master Meriones into the battle, and he kept the horses near while his master was fighting on foot as usual. Idomeneus got into this car, and as he stood there, Hector cast at him. He just missed him, but hit Cyrannus under the ear, cutting through the tongue and spilling his teeth. Cyrannus tumbled out, dropping the reins. But Meriones stooped and picked them up from the ground, saying, "Whip 'em up and away to the ships. You see yourself that we are losing now." So Idomeneus whipped them up and got away, and Cyrannus saved Idomeneus, but not his own life. Aeneas and Menelaus also saw that the victory was passing from them, and Aeneas said, "Damn it, any fool can see that Father Zeus is helping the other side. All their shots hit, whether a good man throws or a bad man. Zeus makes 'em all go straight, and all ours miss and stick in the ground. Well, we must look after ourselves. What is the best thing to do? We want to bring off this body and get back to our friends, too. They will be glad to see us. I think they are sorry enough if they look in this direction. They cannot expect us to keep off Hector the Invincible. He'll soon be upon our ships. I wish someone would go at once and tell Achilles. I don't believe he has even heard the bad news that his dear friend is dead. But I cannot see such a man anywhere. Men and horses are all swallowed up in this mist. Oh, Father Zeus, save the Achaeans out of this mist. Make the sky clear. Grant us to see with our eyes. Kill us in the light, since it is thy pleasure to kill us." The father pitied him as he prayed with tears in his eyes. In a moment he scattered the mist and the dust. The sun shone above. All the scene of the battle was disclosed. Then Aeneas said, "Look about now, my lord Menelaus, if you can see Antilochus alive still, and send him to tell Achilles that his dearest friend is dead." So Menelaus moved away as a lion retreats from a farmyard, tired with fighting off dogs and men. He leapt in, greedy for meat, but got none, for they have been awake all night to save their fat cattle from his jaws, and he has met with showers of lances thrown by strong hands, and burning brands which terrify him. So when the dawn comes, he must depart disappointed. No less unwilling was Menelaus to leave Patroclus a prey to the Trojans, as he feared he would be, now all the army was en route. Before he went, he said earnestly, "Be careful, you two, and Meriones, you are in charge here, and you must not forget the gentle Patroclus, poor fellow. He was kind and pleasant to all in his life, but now death and fate has found him." Then he moved away, glancing watchfully all round, like the eagle which is said to have keenest sight of all birds that fly in the heavens. High in the air he spies the quick-footed hare lying under a thick bush, stoops in a flash, and kills him. So Menelaus cast sharp glances around among the throng of men to see if he could spy the son of Nestor alive. Suddenly he saw him away to the left, rallying the men as well as he could, and he called out as soon as he was near enough, "Antilochus, this way, my good man. I have bad news for you, I am sorry to say. I think you can see already for yourself that God is rolling up trouble for us, and the Trojans have the best of it. But we have had a terrible loss. Patroclus is dead. Now then, run as quick as you can and tell Achilles. He may be able to save the body, but that is all. His armor is gone. Hector has it." Antilochus was shocked to hear the news. He was struck dumb. His eyes filled with tears, and his voice was choked. But he did what he was told, gave his arms to Laodocus, who was following him with the horses, and ran off at full speed. This left the Pylians without a leader. They were hard-pressed and looked for another, but Menelaus did not care to stay there and take the place of their leader. He put Thrasymedes in charge and ran back himself to defend the body of Patroclus. As soon as he reached Aeneas, he said, "I have just sent your man at full speed to tell Achilles, but I don't believe he will come just now. He may be furious against Hector, but he could not fight naked and bare. We must do what we can for ourselves and see if we can save the body and our own lives too." Aeneas said, "Quite right, Menelaus. Be quick. You and Meriones, put your arms under the body and lift it. You carry it away, and we two will protect your rear against Hector and all the rest. We have one name and one heart, and we are well used to stand side by side and face the foe." So they hoisted the body with a great effort. The Trojans raised a yell when they saw them lifting the body, and rushed at them like dogs that run before their masters upon a wounded boar. They run furiously until he turns on them in defiance. Then they scurry back all over the place. So the Trojans would come on in a body, stabbing at them with spears and swords, but whenever the doughty pair turned on them and stood, their color changed, and not one would dare to advance and show fight. In this way they carried the body to the ships, fighting as they went, while the battle spread round them like a wildfire which suddenly rises and spreads over a city, blown before the wind, until the houses fall in ruins amid the blaze. So, as they moved on, the ceaseless din of horses and fighting men rose all about them, and the two did their task like mules, putting forth all their dogged strength to drag a balk or a ship's mast down a rocky path, worn out with sweat and weariness. Behind them the two namesakes held off the battle, as a woody ridge right across the plain holds a flood, holds the torrents of mighty rivers, and drives off their waters over the plain for all their impetuous force. But the Trojans pressed them hard, and especially two, glorious Hector and Aeneas and Chrysiades. The Achaeans fled before them with death shrieks, and forgot how to fight, as daws or starlings fly in a cloud with death shrieks when they see a falcon who is certain death for small birds. Many a fine spear and shield was thrown away and left around and about the moat in the Danaan rout, but there was never a moment's peace. Book 18. How Achilles received the news, and how his mother got him new armor from Hephaestus. While the battle went on like blazing fire, Antilochus had been running at the top of his speed to Achilles. He found Achilles in front of the ships, anxious and thoughtful. He feared what had really happened, and he was saying to himself, "What can this mean? Here are our people again rushing in a rabble towards the camp. I fear the gods may bring bitter grief on me, as my mother told me once. She declared that the best man of the Myrmidons would be killed in battle while I yet lived. It must be the brave Miltiades who is dead. Headstrong man, I ordered him strictly to come back as soon as he had got rid of the fire, and not to fight with Hector." As these thoughts were passing through his mind, there was Antilochus. When he was near enough, he told his cruel news, with tears running down his cheeks. "Bad news, my lord prince. I have very bad news for you, I am sorry to say. Patroclus is dead. They are fighting for his body. Only the body for the armor is lost. Hector has it." Sorrow fell on Achilles like a cloud. He swept up the dust with both hands and poured it over his head and smirched his handsome face till the black dirt stained his fragrant tunic. He tore his hair and fell flat in the dust, grand in his grandeur. The captive women also, whom he and Patroclus had taken, wailed in grief and ran out to where he lay, beating their breasts and half fainting. Antilochus had taken the hands of Achilles and stood weeping beside him, while he moaned heavily, for he feared Achilles might put the steel to his own throat. His gracious mother heard his terrible cry, sitting by her old father deep down in the sea. She shrieked, and all the Nereid nymphs gathered about her in the deep sea. There came Glauce and Thalia and Samodose, Nisaea and Speo, Chloe and round-eyed Hali, Simothoe and Actia and Limnorea, Melite and Ira, Amphithoe and Agoe, Doto and Proto, Pharusa and Dynamene, Dexamene and Amphinome and Callianera, Doris and Panope and famous Galatea, Nemertes and Apsudes and Callianassa. There came Clymene and Deianira and Dianassa, Maera and Orethia, and curly-headed Amathea, and all the other Nereids of the deep sea. All beat their breasts and wailed, as Thetis led off the lament. "Hear me, sister Nereids, and you all shall know the sorrow of my heart. Woe is me, unhappy mother of a noble son. I bore a lovely boy, perfect and strong, a hero above heroes. He ran up like a slim tree. I tended him like a choice plant in the garden. I let him go in the fleet to fight against Ilios, but I shall never have him back again. He will never return to his father's house. As long as he lives and sees the light of the sun, he has only sorrow, and I can do nothing to help him. But I must go and see my dear child, and hear what trouble has come to him so far from the battle." She left the cave, and her sisters went with her, weeping, through the water, until they came to the Trojan strand. There they stepped out upon the beach, one after another, not far from the place where the Myrmidons had drawn up their ships, and Thetis sought her son. She found him groaning, and clasped his head with a sorrowful cry, saying simply, "My child, why do you weep? What is your trouble? Tell me, don't hide it. Zeus has done all that for you, all you besought him to do. The whole army has been brought to disaster for want of you, and huddled up under their ships." Achilles said with a deep groan, "Yes, my dear mother, the Olympian has done all that for me. But what good do I get of all that now if my dear friend Patroclus is dead? I cared more for him than all my companions, as much as for my own life. He is lost. My armor is Hector's. Hector killed him. Hector stripped off that miraculous armor, that beautiful armor, that wonder of wonders, which the gods gave to Peleus on the day when they laid you in a mortal's bed. I wish you had gone on living with your immortal sisters of the sea, and Peleus had married a mortal wife. But now, it was all to bring 1,000 sorrows on you, too, for your son's death. You will never have me back again. I shall never go home, for I have no desire myself to live and remain among men, unless I may kill Hector first with my own spear, and make him pay the death price for Patroclus Menetiades." Thetis answered, weeping, "You have not long to live, my child, if you say that. Quick after Hector, fate is ready for you." Achilles burst out in anger. "Quick, let me die, since it seems my friend was killed, and I was not there to help him. He perished far from his native land, and I was not there to defend him. But now, since I am never to return home, since I brought no hope to Patroclus or my other comrades whom Hector killed, and how many they are, since I only sit idle beside the ships, a burden to the earth, although there is none like me in battle. As for debate, others are better there. Oh, that discord might utterly cease to be in heaven or earth, and anger that makes even the prudent man take offense. Anger that is far sweeter than trickling honey, and grows in men's hearts like smoke, just as I was made angry now by my lord King Agamemnon. But I will let bygones be bygones, although I am indignant. I will rule my temper because I must. Now I will go and find the destroyer of that dear life. Fate I will welcome whenever Zeus and all gods may choose to bring it. Not even the mighty Heracles escaped fate, and he was one that Lord Zeus Cronion loved best of all. Yes, fate brought him low, and the implacable anger of Hera. So with me. If a like fate has been ordained for me, there I shall lie when I am dead. But now may I win a glorious name. May they know that I have been long away from the battle. May I bring sobs and groaning to some wives of Troy and Dardania, and tears to their tender cheeks, which they shall wipe away with both hands. Don't try to keep me from the battle. You love me, I know, but you shall never persuade me." Silverfoot Thetis answered, "Yes, indeed, my child, that is true. It is no bad thing to defend comrades in distress and danger of death. But your armor is in the enemy's hands. Hector is wearing that fine shining gear on his own shoulders. He is proud enough, yet I don't think he will have it long to boast of, for death is near him. But I do beseech you not to enter the battle until you see me here again. Tomorrow I will come back at sunrise, with new armor from Hephaestus himself." She turned from her son and said to her sisters as they went away, "Now you must return to our father's house and tell all to the old man of the sea. I am going to Olympus to ask Hephaestus the master craftsman if he will kindly make new armor for my son." And so they dived again into the sea, and Silverfoot Thetis set out for Olympus to fetch new armor for her dear boy. But all the while the Achaean rout went on, as Hector chased the fugitives with a terrible noise, until they came to their ships on the Hellespont. They could not get the body of Patroclus clear away, for Hector was on them again with horses and men like a consuming fire. 3 times Hector caught him by the legs to drag him away, calling on his men. 3 times the doughty pair were strong enough to beat him off. Now Hector would make a rush through the press. Now he would stand and shout to his men, but never one step backward. Like shepherds who try to keep off a starving lion, the formidable pair could not scare him away from that body. Indeed, he would have dragged it away in triumph if Iris had not appeared. Hera sent her to Achilles without a word to Zeus or any other god. She gave her message clear and plain. "Up, Pelides! Show them your terrors! Go and help Patroclus. His body is the prize of this awful struggle. Trojans charging to drag him away to Troy, Danaans fighting to hold him, all killing each other. And Hector most of all. He means to cut off his head and fix it upon the stakes. Up with you, don't lie there. You should be ashamed to let Trojan dogs tumble and tear Patroclus. Yours is the disgrace if the body is brought in, mangled and mutilated. Achilles answered, My dear goddess, who has sent you with this message? Iris said, Hera sent me, our gracious queen herself. Cronides knows nothing about it, nor any other god in Olympus. Achilles answered, And how can I go into the mall? My armor is in the hands of those men, and my mother forbids me to arm until I shall see her again between my eyes. She has promised to bring me fine new armor from Hephaestus. I don't know any other that I could use, except the great shield of Aeus Telamoniades, but he is there in the front himself, I believe, using his spear to defend Patroclus. Iris said, We know well enough that they hold your armor, but just go and show yourself at the moat, that the Trojans may be startled into quiet, and your people may have a breathing space. There's little time for breath in face of sudden death. Away went Iris at speed, and Achilles rose up. Over his broad shoulders Athena draped the tasseled aegis cape. Over his head she spread a golden haze. From his body shone a white-hot glow. We have seen a city on some island far away in the sea, besieged by enemies. All day long, as they fight, smoke rises to the sky. But when night falls, we see the beacons, one after another, signaling to the world for help, with fires blazing high. So the light rose from the head of Achilles, shining up to the sky as he stepped from the wall and stood beside the moat. He did not mingle with his people, for he remembered his mother's strict command. But there he stood and shouted, and from far away Pallas Athena lifted up her voice. Great was the confusion among the Trojans. The voice of Aeacides sounded loud and clear, like the loud, clear voice of a trumpet when fierce enemies beleaguer a city all about. The Trojans heard the brazen voice of Aeacides, and their hearts were filled with consternation. The horses turned away, foreboding evil to come. The charioteers were dumbfounded to see that bright and terrible light blazing above his head, the light which Athena had kindled. Thrice did Achilles shout aloud from the brink of the moat. Thrice were confounded the Trojans and all their host. There also perished 12 men of their best, speared upon their own chariots by their own spears. Then the Achaeans were glad indeed to draw back the body of Patroclus out of the turmoil and lay it upon a bier. His companions trooped around it, mourning. Achilles followed, weeping hot tears when he saw his faithful friend stretched on the bier and torn with cruel wounds. He had sent him forth to the war with chariots and horses, hoping to welcome a safe return. But what a return was this! The sun set unwearied, for Hera sent him, unwilling, down under the ocean stream, and the Achaeans at last had rest from their desperate struggle. When the Trojans on their part had left the field of battle and unyoked the horses, they gathered in conference before they thought of food. All stood as they held their debate. None could endure to sit, for all were dismayed now Achilles had shown himself, after he had remained so long far from the battlefield. Polydamas, Panthor's son, was the first to speak, for he alone could look both before and behind. He was Hector's close friend. Both were born in one night, but one was first in debate, the other in battle. This man now addressed the assembly. "Look well about you, my friend," he said. "My advice is to retire now to the city, and not to spend this night in the plain before the enemy camp. We are a long way from our walls. So long as yon man was incensed against King Agamemnon, the Achaeans were easier to fight. I was glad myself to sleep near their ships, when I hoped we should take them. But now I am terribly afraid of Pelion. With his overbearing temper, he will never be content to stay in the middle plain where both sides share the battle. For him, the stake is our city and our women. Then let us retreat to the city. Listen to me, for this is what will happen. Just now the blessed night has checked his pursuit, but if he finds us here tomorrow when he sallies forth armed, many a man shall know him well, Many a Trojan shall be gnawed by dogs and vultures, and he that escapes will be glad of a refuge in Ilios. I only pray that the tale may be far from my ears. If we do as I say, with regret, I am sure, we will keep our forces assembled, and the city will be safe behind walls and lofty gates and high doors well barred. Tomorrow at dawn we will arm ourselves and take post along the walls. It will be the worse for him if he comes out and fights for our fortress. Back to the ships he will go when he has had enough of exercising the horses and careering round the city. That temper of his will not give him leave to assault it, and take it he never shall. Dogs shall devour him first." Hector frowned at him and said, "I don't like what you say this time, Polydamas. Go back and huddle up in the city. Haven't you all enough of being cooped in behind walls? There was a time when the whole world talked of Priam's town, Troy, the great magazine of gold and bronze. But now all our homes are stripped of their treasures. Many have been sold and gone to Phrygia or Meonia since Lord Zeus has been displeased. But now, you fool, do not publish those notions of yours any longer, just when the great god has granted me to win success before the enemy camp, and to crush up the Achaeans against the sea. Not a Trojan will listen to you. I will not allow it. Come now, all, do as I shall tell you. First, let us take a good meal in our divisions. See after the watch. Keep awake, every man. If any Trojan is worried overmuch about his goods, let him collect them and distribute them to be mob-gobbled. It is better the people should enjoy them than our enemies. Tomorrow at dawn we will arm ourselves and make a great attack on the ships. If Achilles has really risen up by the ships, it shall be all the worse for him, just as he likes. I, at least, will never turn my back on battle. I will stand up to meet him, to win or lose it all. The god of war will see fair play. He's often slain that wants to slay." The Trojans cheered this speech in their folly, for Pallas Athena stole their sense away. Hector's advice was bad, and they praised him. Polydamas offered good counsel, and no one praised him. Then they took their meal where they were. But the Achaeans mourned Patroclus all night long. Achilles led their lamentations, sobbing and pressing on his friend's breast those hands which had slain so many, groaning like a lion when some hunter has robbed him of his cubs, and he has come back too late. How he scours the glades in search of the robber's track, and hopes to find him with bitter bile in his heart. So Achilles cried aloud to his Myrmidons, "What a fool I was! What empty words I said on that day when I tried to comfort the noble Menoetius in my home. I said I would bring his son back to Opus, covered with glory, victor over Troy, laden with spoil. But Zeus does not fulfill all the designs of men. Both of us are destined to make the same earth red here in Troy. For I shall never return to be welcomed by ancient Peleus in our home, or by Thetis, my mother. But earth shall cover me in this place. But now, Patroclus, since you have gone down into the grave before me, and I am left, I will not give you burial until I shall bring here Hector's arms, and the head of Hector who killed you. Then before your pyre I will cut the throats of 12 noble sons of Troy in payment for your death. Till then you shall lie as you are beside our ships, and round about you shall weep in lamentation night and day Trojan and Dardanian women, whom we have gotten by our strength and by our long spears in sacking many a rich town." Then he directed that a large tripod should be set over the fire to wash the blood from his friend's body. They set the tripod accordingly with a cauldron, and filled it with water, and kindled the wood beneath. The flames curled about the cauldron, and when the water boiled, they washed him, and rubbed him with oil, and filled the wounds with 9-year-old unguent. Then they laid him on a bier wrapped in fine white linen from head to foot, with a white sheet spread over him. All night long Achilles and the Myrmidons mourned for Patroclus. Meanwhile the gods in heaven were talking about it. Zeus said to his queen, "So you have had your way after all, my queen. You need not open your fine eyes like that. You have got Achilles up on his quick feet. One would think those bushy-headed Achaeans were your own children. Queen Hera replied, "What a thing to say, Cronades. You shock me. I suppose even a mere man will do what he can for a man, even a mortal who has not my experience of life. I am chief of all goddesses on 2 counts, because I am eldest, and because I have the honor of being your wife, and you are king of heaven. Ought not I to damage the Trojans when I hate them?" By this time, Silverfoot Thetis had come to the house of Hephaestus, that brazen, starry house, incorruptible, preeminent among the immortals, which old Crookshank himself had made. She found him in a sweat, running about among his bellows, very busy, for he had 20 tripods to make, which were to stand round by the wall of his room. He put golden wheels under the base of each, that they might run of themselves into any party of the gods, and then run back home again. They were a miracle. They were nearly done, only the lugs had to be put on. He was just finishing these and forging the rivets. While the clever creature was making these, Thetis came up. Charis saw her and ran out at once with her veil flying. Pretty Charis, whom the famous Crookshank had made his wife. She clasped the visitor's hand and cried out, "My dear Thetis, what brings you to our humble home in all this finery? This is an honor. I am glad to see you, dear. You don't often come this way. Come in, do, and have something to eat." She led Thetis in and made her sit on a chair covered with silver studs, beautifully carved and inlaid, and set a footstool for her feet. Then she called to Hephaestus, "Husband, come in here. Thetis wants you." The good old hobbler answered, "Then there's a goddess in our house whom I respect and love. She saved my life when I was laid up after that bad fall I had. All my mother's doing, shameless thing, when she wanted to hide me away because I'm lame. I should have had a bad time of it then if your enemy and Thetis had not taken me to their hearts. You know your enemy, the daughter of Ebb and Flow Oceanus. I stayed with them 9 years, and I made them no end of lovely things, brooches, twisted spirals, rosettes, necklaces, all in a hollow cave, and Oceanus rolling ever round and round, foaming and roaring. Not a soul knew where I was, neither god nor mortal man, only Thetis and your enemy, who saved me. And now here she is in our house. I am bound to do anything for Thetis, pretty dear. Pretty hair. I have to pay for my life. You just give her something nice to eat and drink while I put away my bellows and tools." The old nunsuch got up from his anvil, puffing and blowing, and limped about on his nimble thin shanks. The bellows he laid away from the fire, and collected all his working tools in a hutch of silver. Then he wiped a sponge over his face and both arms and sturdy neck and hairy chest, and put on his tunic, and limped out, leaning on a thick stick, with a couple of maids to support him. These were made of gold, exactly like living girls. They have sense in their heads. They can speak and use their muscles. They can spin and weave and do their work by grace of God. These bustled along, supporting their master, and he stumbled to a chair beside Thetis, saying, "My dear Thetis, in all your finery, what brings you to our humble home? This is an honor, and I am glad to see you, my dear. You don't often pay us a visit. Tell me what you want. I shall be pleased to do it, if it is doable, and if I can do it." Thetis answered with tears running down her cheeks, "My dear Hephaestus, is there any goddess in Olympus who has troubles to bear like mine? Zeus Cronades has chosen me out of all to make me miserable. Out of all the daughters of the sea he gave me to a man, to Peleus Yacides, and I had to endure a man's bed against my will. The man lies in his house, worn out with the burden of old age, and now there is more for me. He gave me a son to bear and bring up, a hero of heroes. He ran up like a slim tree. I tended him like a rare plant in my garden. I let him go with the fleet to Iliad for the war. But I shall never get him back. He will never come home to his father's house. As long as he lives and sees the light of the sun, he has trouble, and I cannot go to help him. There was a girl the army chose for him as a prize. She was taken away from him by my lord Agamemnon. There he was, pining away in grief for the girl. Then the Trojans drove the Achaeans back upon their ships and cooped them up there, would not let them get out. The people sent envoys to him with a petition, and promised heaps of fine gifts. He refused to help in the battle himself, but he sent Patroclus in his own armor and strong forces with him. All day long they fought at the Scaean gates, and he would have taken the city then and there. But Apollo killed Patroclus on the field after many great exploits, though Hector had the credit. So now I come to your knees with my prayer for my son, doomed to die so soon. Will you give him a spear and helmet, and a good pair of greaves with ankle guards, and a corselet? What he had was lost when the Trojans killed his faithful friend, and there he lies on the ground in misery. The famous Crookshank answered, "Cheer up, don't worry about that. He shall have his fine armor, and every man that sets eyes on it shall be amazed. I wish I could hide him from death as easily when that dreadful doom shall come." Without a moment's delay he went off to his bellows, poked them into the fire, and told them to get to work. The bellows, 20 in all, blew under their melting pots, ready to blow or to step, letting out the blast strong or weak, or just in any measure he wanted for his work. He put over the fire to melt hard brass and tin, precious gold and silver. Then he placed a great anvil stone on the block, and took hammer in one hand and tongs in the other. First he fashioned a shield, large and strong, adorning it with beautiful designs all over. He made a threefold rim round the edge of shining metal and slung it on a silver baldric. There were 5 layers of hide in the shield. On the surface he laid his clever designs in metal. Upon it he wrought the earth and the sky and the sea, the untiring sun and the full moon, and all the stars that encircle the sky, Pleiades and Hyades, Orion the mighty hunter, and the bear, which men also call the wain, which revolves in its place and watches Orion, and alone of them all never takes a bath in the ocean. Upon it he fashioned 2 cities of mortal men, and fine ones. In the first was wedding and feasting. They were leading brides from their chambers along the streets under the light of blazing torches, and singing the bridal song. There were dancing boys twirling about. Pipes and harps made a merry noise. The women stood at their doors and watched. A crowd was in the marketplace where a dispute was going on. 2 men disputed over the blood price of a man who had been killed. One said he had offered all and told his tale before the people. The other refused to accept anything, but both were willing to appeal to an umpire for the decision. The crowd cheered one or other as they took sides, and the heralds kept them in order. The elders sat in the sacred circle on the polished stones, and each took the herald's staff as they rose in turn to give judgment. Before them lay 2 nuggets of gold for the one who should give the fairest judgment. The other city had 2 armies besieging it round about, all in shining armor. They were divided in plan whether to sack it outright or to take half the wealth of the city in ransom. But the besieged were by no means ready to agree, and they were preparing an ambush. The wives and little children were left to guard the walls with the old men. Others sallied out, led by Ares and Pallas Athena, both worked in gold with golden robes, fine and tall in their armor like real gods, conspicuous above the men who were much smaller. When they arrived at the place chosen for their ambush, near a river where all the animals came to drink, they settled down to wait under arms. Meanwhile they had sent out 2 scouts who sat a long way off to see when the cattle and sheep were coming. Soon they came, with 2 herdsmen playing on their pipes and suspecting nothing. So the men in ambush had good warning, and quickly got round the cattle and fine white sheep, cut out the whole convoy, and killed the herdsmen. The besiegers were still sitting in conclave when they heard the news. They were off at once behind their prancers, arrived in no time, stopped and fought their battle along the river banks with volleys of spears from both sides. And there among them was discord. There was tumult. There was cruel fate, holding one just wounded and still alive, and one unwounded, dragging one dead by the feet, and the cloak she wore on her shoulders was red with the blood of men. They looked like living men as they struggled and fought and pulled back the dead bodies from either side. Upon it he placed a rich field of soft fallow land, broad acres already thrice ploughed. Many ploughmen were driving their teams up and down with a turn at the end. Whenever they came to the headland after a turn, there was a man to receive them and hand them a mug of wine. Then they turned again to their furrows and made all haste to the headland. The soil was black behind them, and looked like soil under the plough, although it was gold. That was a wonderful thing. Upon it he put a royal demesne, where the hands were reaping with sharp sickles. Gavels were falling in a row along the swathe. Others the binders were binding into sheaves with wisps of straw. 3 sheaf binders were standing by, and boys behind them were getting the gavels and bringing them up continually. The king was among them, standing, staff in hand, near the swathe, silent and happy. The heralds were under an oak tree a little way off. They had killed an ox and were getting it ready for supper, while the women were making barley porridge for the hands' luncheon. Upon it he put a vineyard heavy with grapes, all of beautiful gold. The place was thick with standing poles of silver, and the grapes hanging on them were black. A ditch of blue enamel ran round it, and a fence of tin. There was one path only across, by which the carriers passed when they gathered the vintage. Boys and girls in merry glee carried the honey-sweet fruit in baskets of wicker-work. In the midst, a boy with a melodious harp played a delightsome tune, and sang to the harp a dainty ditty in a sweet little voice. The others tripped along behind him, singing and shouting and keeping time by the beat of their feet. Upon it he fashioned a herd of straight-horn cattle. The cattle were made of gold and tin. They made their way from the midden to pasture along the murmuring riverside, along the quivering reeds. Golden herdsmen stalked beside them, 4 men with 9 quick-footed dogs. 2 grim lions were among the cows in front, holding a roaring bull. They dragged him away, bellowing loudly. Dogs and men were after him. The lions had torn open the bull's hide, and they were gorging his red blood and bowels. In vain the men tarred on the dogs, which ran up close and barked and jumped back. But as for biting, they kept out of reach. Upon it he made a pasturage for fleecy white sheep, a wide place in a pleasant dell with folds and pens and roofed huts. Upon it he worked a dancing place, like the one that Daedalus made in Knossos for curly-headed Ariadne. There young men and maidens of price danced, holding one by the wrist. The maidens were clad in soft linen, the lads in fine-spun tunics, glossy with a touch of oil. The maidens wore pretty chaplets. The lads carried golden daggers hung from silver straps. Now they circled on practised feet, light and smooth as a potter's wheel when he sits and tries with a touch of his hands whether it will run. Now they would scamper to meet in opposite line. A crowd stood round, enjoying the lovely dance. A heavenly minstrel twangled his harp, and 2 tumblers twirled about among them, leading the merry sport. Upon it he placed the mighty river of Oceanus at the extreme edge of the shield. When the shield was finished, he fashioned a corselet that shone brighter than fire. He fashioned a strong helmet with a golden crest. He fashioned greaves of flexible tin. Then the famous Crookshank craftsman brought all he had made and laid it before Thetis, and she shot like a falcon from snowy Olympus, bearing the bright armor to her son. Book 19. How Achilles made friends with Agamemnon and armed himself for war. Dawn, in her saffron robe, arose out of the ocean stream, bringing light for heaven and earth, and Thetis came to the Achaean camp with the gods' gifts for her son. He lay with Patroclus in his arms, weeping bitterly, while his comrades were mourning around. The goddess clasped his hand and said, "My dear child, we must let this man be for all our sorrow. He is dead once for all, since that is God's will. Now, for you, accept these fine gifts from Hephaestus. See how fine they are. No man has ever worn them." She laid them before Achilles in a rattling pile. The Myrmidons were too much startled to look at them and shrank back, but Achilles looked. When he saw them, how his anger swelled, how his eyes blazed as if with some inward flame. But he was glad when he held in his own hands the glorious gifts of the god. When he had enjoyed this pleasure for a while, he told her plainly what he meant to do. "Mother," he said, "this armor is indeed the work of immortal hands, such as no man could make. Now I will get ready at once, but I am very much afraid the flies may get into my dear friend's wounds. Worms will breed and make the flesh nasty. There's no life in it. The body will rot." Thetis answered, "Do not trouble about that, my child. I will see what I can do to keep off those savage tribes of flies, which batten on those killed in war. Even if he lies here a whole 12 months, his flesh will be as sound as ever, or sounder. What you must do is call a meeting of the princes and denounce your feud against King Agamemnon. Then you may arm yourself at once and clothe you in your valor." Then she dropped into the dead man's nostrils red nectar and ambrosia to keep the flesh wholesome. Achilles felt new courage after his mother's words. He paced along the shore, calling aloud in a great voice, and summoned the Achaean princes, even those who used to stay always aboard the ships, the pilots who kept the steering oars, and the stewards who gave out the food. Even these came to the assembly, and the 2 doughty men of war, Tydides the indomitable and Prince Odysseus. They also came, limping and leaning on their spears, for their wounds troubled them still, and then sat down in front. After them came my lord Agamemnon, still suffering from the wound which he owed to Coon, Antenor's son. As soon as the assembly was full, Achilles rose to his feet and spoke. "Atrides, what good was it to us both, you and me, to take things to heart so, and to fall into a soul-devouring feud for a girl? I wish Artemis had shot her dead with an arrow on that day when I took Lyrnessus. Then all those brave men would have been saved who bit the dust in battle because I was angry. Hector and the Trojans got all the good there was, and I think the Achaean nation will not soon forget my feud and yours. But we must let bygones be bygones. We must forget our sorrow and control our temper, for we cannot help it. Then here is the end of my resentment, for I must not be angry for ever and ever. Come, then, make haste, and tell the army to get ready for battle. Let me meet the enemy face to face once more, and see if they would like to spend a quiet night near our ships. But I think there are some who will be glad to bend the knee in rest if they escape from the battle when my spear shall drive them." The assembly was glad indeed to hear Achilles denounce his feud. Then King Agamemnon answered from the place where he was sitting without coming forward to the front. "My friends, my brave Danaans," here he was interrupted by cries and disturbance. "My friends, it is right to give a hearing to any speaker who rises. It is not fair to break in. That makes it hard for the best of speakers." Further disturbance. "With all this noise in the crowd, how can a man speak? How can you hear? It is too much for the loudest voice. Pelides is the man. I want to explain things to him. Please listen, the rest of you, and take note of what I say." Loud cries. "It was all your fault." "People have said that to me often enough and reproached me, but it was not my fault. Zeus, fate, the avenger that walketh in darkness, it was their fault. They put that blind madness in my heart amongst you all on that day when I robbed Achilles of his prize myself. But what could I do? God bringeth all things to pass. Eldest daughter of Zeus is Ate, the blindness that blindeth all. Accursed may she be. Tender are her feet, for she touches not the ground, but she walks upon the heads of men to their harm, and binds fast many a one. Aye, before now Zeus himself was blinded. He that is chief of gods and men, as they say. Yet even he, as it seems, was deceived by Hera with her women's wiles, on the day when Alcmene was to bring forth mighty Heracles in wall-crowned Thebes. Zeus made his boast before the assembled gods. Hear me, he said, gods and goddesses all. I have something that I wish to announce. Today the Lady of Travail will bring a man to the light, one who shall rule all the people round about, one of those men who are sprung from my blood and lineage. Hera made answer in the cunning of her heart. You shall prove a liar. Time will show that you cannot make good your words. Swear to me now, Olympian, a solemn oath, that that man shall rule the people round about, who this day shall fall between a woman's feet, being of your blood and lineage. Zeus did not understand her cunning. He was wholly blinded, and swore that solemn oath. Then Hera darted down from the heights of Olympus, and quickly sped to Ician Argos. There, as she knew, was the wife of Sthenelus Persiades, 7 months gone with child, and she brought forth a son to the light, though he lacked the full tale of months. As for Alcmene, Hera delayed the birth, and held back the ladies of travail. Then she went herself with tidings to Zeus Cronion. Father Zeus, fiery thunderbolt, I have news for you. Already a strong man is born who shall rule the people of Argos. Eurystheus, the son of Sthenelus Persiades, he is your child. It is unbecoming that he should rule the people of Argos. These words cut him to the heart. Forthwith he seized Ate by the hair of her head in his wrath, and swore a solemn oath that Ate the blinder who blinds all should never again enter Olympus and the starry sky. He swung her round and cast her out of heaven. Quickly she fell down into the world of men. To think of her made him groan whenever he saw his own son toiling and moiling in disgrace for Eurystheus. So it was with me. When now again Hector dealt destruction among our people beside our own ships, I could not forget Ate the blinder, who at the beginning made me blind. But since I was blinded, and Zeus took away my sense, I wish to make amends and to pay anything in atonement. To the battle then, sir, I pray. Lead the army to battle. Treasures in plenty are here, and here am I, ready to offer all that Odysseus promised you yesterday in your quarters. If you wish, wait now, though you are so fervent to begin. I will send servants to bring the treasures here, and you shall see that they are enough to content you. Achilles answered, My lord King Agamemnon, as for treasures, they are yours to give, if you will, which is right and proper, or to keep. But now let us think of battle, and at once. We must not waste time jabber-winding here. There is a great work yet undone. To see Achilles once more in the field and striking down the battalions of Troy with his spear, let each of you remember what that was, and fight his man. Odysseus said to this, Wait a bit, Achilles. We know your quality, but do not drive out the army to battle fasting. Fighting lasts a long time when once the battalions meet, and God breathes courage into both sides. First, order them all to take food and drink here in camp. Strength and courage both are mine when I have my bread and wine. No man can fight all day from dawn to sunset on an empty belly. Even if his spirit is ardent for battle, yet his limbs grow heavy unawares. Hunger and thirst come on him. His knees stagger as he goes. But after plenty of food and wine, a man can fight all day. His heart is brave, his limbs are not weary, until all take their leave from the battlefield. Then dismiss and tell them to take a proper meal. But first, let my lord Agamemnon bring his treasures into this assembly, that everyone may see them, and you may be consoled yourself. Let the king stand up before all and swear that he has never gone into that woman's bed or had to do with her. Be gracious and forgiving yourself, sir, and let him make friends with you in his own quarters over a handsome banquet, that you may lack nothing which is due. My lord king, you will be a juster man to others after this. It is no shame for a king to make amends when he has wronged a man without provocation. The king answered, I am glad to hear what you have said, Laertiades. It was all true and excellently put. I am ready to take my oath. It is my own wish, and I will not speak falsely before God. But let Achilles wait a while. Wait, all the rest of you, until what I offer is brought before you, and we swear friendship together. For you, sir, this is my request. Choose out the first of our young princes to carry the treasures from my ship, which I promised yesterday, and to bring the women. My herald Talthybius shall find a boar pig somewhere for the sacrifice to Zeus and Helios." Achilles answered at once, "My lord King Agamemnon Atrides, another time will do better for that matter, when there shall be some pause in the battle, and when there is less passion in my heart. Those men are still lying mangled on the field. The men Hector killed while Zeus gave him victory, and you two are sending us to dinner. What I would say is, fight, men, fasting and foodless. At sunset we will have a great supper, when we have wiped out our disgrace. Till then, not a drop of drink or a bit of food shall pass down my throat. For my friend is dead. He lies in my hut mangled with spear thrusts, his feet turned to the door. My friends are mourning around, and I care for no such thing. Only death and blood and the heavy groans of men." Odysseus now spoke. "Prince Achilles," he said, "you are the greatest man in our host, stronger than I am, and better far in the field of battle. But I would put myself before you far in judgment, for I am your elder, and my experience greater. Then bear with me, and give me a hearing. Men soon grow sick of battle. When Zeus, the steward of warfare, tilts the scales, and cold steel reaps the fields, the grain is very little, but the straw is very much. The belly is a bad mourner, and fasting will not bury the dead. Too many are falling, man after man, and day after day. How could one ever have a moment's rest from privations? No, we must harden our hearts and bury the man who dies, and shed our tears that day. But those who survive the horrors of war should not forget to eat and drink, and then we shall be better able to wear our armor, which never grows weary, and to fight our enemies for ever and ever. Now no one must hang back expecting another summons. This is the summons. There will be trouble if anyone stays behind. Let us march all together and waken up war against our enemy." No sooner said than done. He called Nestor's 2 sons, with Meges, Phalus' son, Thoas and Meriones, Lycomedes, Creontiades, and Melanippus. And they went to Agamemnon's quarters and collected the 7 tripods which he had promised, and the burnished cauldrons, and the 12 horses. Then they led out the 7 skillful workwomen, and 8 beautiful Briseis. Odysseus weighed out 10 nuggets of gold, and carrying these he led the way, followed by the other young princes with their burdens. These treasures were laid before the assembly, and Agamemnon rose to his feet. Talthybius the herald stood by his side, holding the boar in his arm. Then Agamemnon drew out the knife that used to hang by the sheath of his great sword, and cut the firstling hairs from the boar. He lifted up his hands to Zeus and prayed, while the people all sat silent, listening as is meet. He prayed in these words, looking up into the broad heavens. "Witness, first Zeus, highest and greatest of the gods. Witness earth and sun, and the avengers, who below the earth punish all men that take a lying oath. Never have I laid my hand on the maiden Briseis, neither desiring her for my bed nor for any other thing. She has remained untouched under my roof. If any word of this is false, may God send upon me all the afflictions which he sends upon one who swears a lying oath." As he spoke, he cut the boar's throat. Then Talthybius swung it round his head and threw it into the deep sea, food for fishes. Achilles now rose and spoke. "O Father Zeus, great is the blindness thou sendest upon men. Never would Atrides have stirred up my temper to last all this time. Never would he have carried off the girl against my will, deaf to everything. But Zeus, I suppose, wished to bring death on many of our people. Now, go to your meal, and then we will fight." Thus he dismissed the assembly, and they were soon dispersing to their ships. The Myrmidons took charge of the treasures and brought them to the ships of Achilles. They put away the goods in his quarters and found a place for the women, and the grooms drove off the horses to join the rest. But when Briseis, radiant as golden Aphrodite, caught sight of Patroclus, mangled and pierced with spears, she threw herself on the body and shrieked aloud, tearing her breast and tender neck and lovely face, and cried out through her tears, "O Patroclus, best beloved of my unhappy heart, alive I left you when I went from this place, and now I find you dead, my prince of men, when I return. So my life is trouble upon trouble without end. My husband, who took me from my father's hands, I saw mangled and pierced with spears before the wall. 3 brothers dear to me, all my own mother's sons, these also met their doom. And when Achilles killed my husband and took the city of Prince Mynes, you told me not to weep. You promised that Achilles should take me to Phthia and make me his wedded wife and hold our wedding feast in the Myrmidons' country. Therefore I weep without ceasing for you dead, since you were always kind." She wept, and the women wailed with her, in show for Patroclus, but each also for her own woes. Round about Achilles was a group of Achaean elders who begged him to eat, but he refused, groaning, "I beg you, if any of you, my dear comrades, will listen, do not ask me to touch food or drink, for I am in deep sorrow. I will wait for sunset and bear it as best I can." Most of the princes dispersed at this, but the 2 kings remained, and Odysseus, Nestor, and Idomeneus, and the old man, Phoenix, trying their best to comfort him in his sorrow. But he would not be comforted before he could plunge into the maw of bloody battle. He could not forget. Heaving a deep sigh, he said, "Time was when you, my dearest comrade, now so cruelly lost, when you with your own hands would lay me a tasty meal, quickly and neatly, while all was hurry to get into the battlefield. Now you lie there mangled, and I have not the heart to touch food and drink, though there is plenty, because I miss you so. For nothing worse could ever happen to me, not if I heard of my father's death. And now I suppose he is shedding tears in Phthia for want of a son like me. And here I am in a foreign land, battling with Trojans for the sake of that horrible Helen. Or it might be the boy in Scyros, my dear son, if Neoptolemus is still alive. Once I hoped and wished that I alone should perish here, far from home, and that you should return to Phthia. You could have picked up my boy at Scyros and taken him home. You could have showed him my estate and the servant and my stately house. Peleus would have been dead and gone by that time, and I think he must be dead already, or perhaps just alive and unhappy in his old age, always waiting for the cruel news that I am dead." He wept as he spoke, and the old men mourned with him, each thinking of what he had left behind. It was a pitiable sight for Zeus also, and he spoke in his usual downright way to Athena. "My dear girl, you have quite deserted your hero. Has Achilles gone clean out of your mind? There he sits in front of the ships mourning for his friend without a bite or sup. All the rest have gone to their dinner. Go along and drop nectar and ambrosia into his breast, or he will starve." This was just what she wanted to do. Like a harpy, long-winged, shrill screaming, she dived out of heaven through the air. The Achaeans were then making ready for battle. She dropped the precious ambrosia and nectar into his breast to save him from the pangs of hunger, and returned to her great father's house. Now they were all pouring out from the camp, thick and fast, helmets gleaming bright, bossy shields, strong-plated corselets, lance-wood spears. Their sheen filled the sky. All the earth laughed with the glittering metal. The tramp of men resounded under their feet. It was like one great snowstorm when the flakes fly thick and fast through the air, icy cold in the clear blast of Boreas. In their midst was Achilles, arming himself in the armor that Hephaestus had made, while grief intolerable sank deep into his heart. He gnashed his teeth, his eyes flashed fire, his mind was upon the enemy. First he clasped over his legs those fine greaves with their silver ankle guards. Next he put the corselet about his chest, and slung the silver-studded sword over his shoulders. Then he took up the great shield, which gleamed like another moon, with a light which filled the place, as the light that burns in a lonely farmstead up on the mountains, seen from the open sea by mariners when a gale has blown them out of their course far away. Then he lifted the strong helmet and set it upon his head, shining like a star and nodding its golden plumes. Achilles tried himself in the armor to see if it fitted and if his limbs had easy play. It seemed to lift him up in the air like wings. He raised his father's spear from the stand, that spear, long, heavy, strong, which no other man in the Achaean host could wield, but only Achilles knew how to handle, that ash-wood spear from Pelion, which Chiron got from the mountain top and gave his father to be the terror of his foes. The horses were harnessed and put to by Automedon and Alcimos. They settled the breast straps about them, they put the bits in their mouths, they drew back the reins to the car. Automedon took whip in hand and jumped in. Achilles followed, armed for war, and shining like golden Hyperion. Then he called to his father's horses, "Bay and piebald, you famous colts of quick foot, find some better way to bring your driver off safely when we have had enough of fighting. Don't leave him there dead like Patroclus." Then bonny Bay spoke out from under the yoke, for Hera gave him speech. He suddenly bowed his head till his mane fell under the yoke-pad and swept the ground, and spoke in a human voice. "Sure enough, we will save you yet this time, mighty Achilles. But the day of your death is near. We are not to blame, but a great God and compelling fate. No slowness or tardiness of ours let the Trojans tear the armor from Patroclus, but that most powerful god, the son of beauteous Icto, slew him in the forefront of the fray and gave Hector his triumph. We could run swift as the west wind, lightest of all the winds that blow, but it is your own fate to fall by the strength of a god and a man." He said no more, for the avengers checked his speech. But Achilles answered him angrily, "Why do you foretell death for me? You need not. I know well myself that it is my fate to die here far from my father and my mother. Still, I will never cease driving the Trojans until they have had enough of war." With these words, he shouted and drove his team to the front. Book 20. How Achilles swept the battlefield, and how the gods helped on either side.
Welcome back.